Hello class. Each week I'd like to give you a tutorial that talks a little more about design using Photoshop and Fireworks together with Dreamweaver. So these will be tutorials that are designed to give you some tips to help you get used to using all these programs together and not relying 100% on any one program, especially not relying all on Photoshop for the look of the website. So the way that this site is developed is I use Fireworks and I use Photoshop for some of the graphics, and then I broke those graphics down into smaller pieces and then assembled the website in Dreamweaver. So I'll show you a little bit about how I went about building this website. It is in need of a redesign, but you know the structure of it I think is worth looking at, and some of the graphics. So anyway, let me start with just show you how I began this design. I'm going to switch over here to Fireworks, and then I also used Photoshop. So here's what I do in Fireworks when I'm going to design a site like this. If it's going to be a straight HTML, CSS website, might have some video in it, but probably no Flash. What I'm going to do is create a canvas that's larger than the size, ultimately the final size of my website. So for example, in Dreamweaver, you know about these sizes now. If you drop down, you can see that there's a 1000 by 620 that gives you a 1024 by 768 maximized. So what you want to do is create a canvas that's larger than that in Photoshop or Fireworks, but then put your guidelines at these marks. So make guidelines that are about 1000 pixels wide by 620. You can be kind of approximate with that, but don't go much larger. So I'll show you what that does. So if you look at this site, you can see these white lines at the top, and then this one, I'll just get rid of that one for now. But you can see these white lines at the top, right here, and then the horizontal ones here and here. So that square in the middle represents that size in Dreamweaver. So why do I do that? Well, I do that so that I can get a better sense of the way I want the website to look when I export it and rebuild it in Dreamweaver, because it's not often that you're going to look at your site in a 1024 by 768 browser and it's going to look exactly like this center square, but that's what you're designing for. Your monitor is probably bigger than that, so what you want to do is sort of get a sense on the whole of what the site is going to look like in different size monitors. And it also helps a little bit with your design, gives you more area to move things around if you need to, and also lets you incorporate a background to see how that background is going to look. So what I have here again is a bigger canvas. So if I look at my canvas size, I say, well, it's actually not that much bigger, but it's 1050 by 800. And then again, this is set at about 50, this guideline, and this one's at 1000, so that's about 950. And then you can see this on the left hand side that runs somewhere around 550. So that's a little square. That's what my website, the size that it's going to be. Then I have a background that I know I want to be a full screen background. Okay, so that's a background that I developed in Photoshop and then just brought in to use as the full screen background. So that's the one that you see behind this, and it looks different depending on what size monitor you are on, because it kind of centers and then stretches out. You can see that background behind there. Okay, so that's why I'm using that larger canvas, so I can get a sense of what that background is going to do for my website. Okay, so I got the background, I can control that, and then I have my separate pieces for the site. So in this case I have title up here at the top, links, get those the way I want them, and then I have my main content box right here. This is a little bit large and stretches outside of the guideline, which is okay. You can make that fit in there later when you're doing CSS, because that's going to work well as a division tag. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to think about how would this site be rebuilt in Dreamweaver without relying 100% on Fireworks to build the HTML for me. You don't want to do that. You don't want to let Photoshop or Fireworks write all that HTML for you. What you want to do is start thinking about how can your design fit into a division tag layout. How can CSS develop the site for you using these different pieces? So what I do is I use slices to export all these different pieces, and then I use those pieces to insert into the CSS layout. So if I used slices in Fireworks, I would just use the slice tool, and then I would come here and I would draw these slices. Again, it doesn't matter about outside of those lines. I would just draw and kind of get those slices the way I want. Now I've already sliced here, so I'm going to undo that and turn this on. So here's how I slice this left-hand side. Now if I look at this website, this is one of the simpler examples I can show you. It's good to start out simply, but this site doesn't need much as far as slicing and exporting to be rebuilt in Dreamweaver. What I did here was export each of these as a separate piece, and then I also exported the rollover images. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I also did rollovers to change the color, and then re-exported those again. So what you can do is actually select all these slices. If you're using Fireworks, Photoshop is pretty similar. Fireworks is image preview, Photoshop is save for the web. It's totally up to you what program you use. You may not even have these graphics programs right now, so these are tutorials that you can watch and then try out when you get a chance. You can also download trial versions of these graphics programs that will work for 30 days. So either program will work fine. Fireworks is a little easier, and it's developed entirely for web graphic design. Photoshop is much more complicated, and sometimes it can be a little trickier if you're developing only for the web versus working with photography and print. But either program would be just fine. So in this case, I would do an image preview, and then I'm going to select what I want the image to be as far as the format, and I would click export. And then I can export all of these at the same time. So I can do images only. Now this program will write some CSS for you. If you have the program and you want to try it out, you are welcome to. I would not recommend that you go with it because the layout is hard to edit and you don't really have full control over it. It's a lot better to build the site the way that you want it. You'll have a better understanding of it. It'll be easier for you to update and make changes to it also. So usually what I do is images only, and then I'll do export slices, and I'll do selected slices. So that saves all of those for me. Okay, I chose the wrong file type with that, I believe. I'll cancel that. Okay, so that would save all of those separately, and then that would go into my division tag one after another. Those images would drop in there. Now this right hand side I don't need to export because you've probably seen that looks exactly like a division tag. So if I look at the website again, this actually I used a little background. I did a box on it so that it looked a little better. But it's just a division tag on the left hand side, images one by one here, and then division tag on the right hand side, image right here, and then an embedded YouTube video right there. I'll show it to you in Dreamweaver. So that's what I do, or I'll show it to you in Dreamweaver in just a second. Let me finish up with the graphics. So you can create your websites in a graphics program like this, do what's called the mock-up. So you want to kind of get the mock-up looking the way you want and then show your client so that you can get approval before you start actually building the site. You don't want to waste your time and build the site in Dreamweaver before you have approval, obviously. So get the mock-up done, but you want to make sure that the mock-up, the sample image is something that you can create in Dreamweaver fairly simply if you need to. So that's what I did in Fireworks. I'll switch over to Photoshop quickly. Photoshop I use for, I'll use it for full websites, and I also use it for backgrounds. Like if you're going to do a full screen background and then place your site over top of it, it works really well for gradients. So in this particular case, I have a blue and a white set. This is kind of how I worked on that background. And then I have my gradient set to, let's see, it's a linear gradient, and I have some multiple layers going here. So every time you put your gradient on here, if you just draw it, it's going to drop a different look on there. Okay, so you can continue to do multiple layers. Okay, just like that, and then you can drop the opacity down. You can try different blend modes, and you'll get some different looks on there. Dropping the opacity. Okay, and then you can even apply some filters to it if you want. And then if you are going to use this type of background, you want to make sure it's large enough. So this would be a full screen background. So if I go to my image and image size, You can see this one's 1500 by 1000. You can even go larger than that if you're going to do a full screen background. Now the trick to doing these full screen backgrounds is really two things. You want to make sure your site looks good on this background. So again, that's why I use, like back here in Fireworks, that's why I use a larger canvas and then have that site sitting on top of the background to kind of see how it's going to look. So that's the first thing that you want to do. Remember that your site is probably going to, sit right in the middle, like a box, kind of like that, on top of it. And then it might go, left or right depending on the size of the monitor. Okay, and then the other thing that I would do, the other trick to this, is make sure that you save it so that the file size is not outrageously large. So I would do a file save for web in Photoshop. Okay, now this looks weird as a GIF image. You can see a lot of pixelation. Okay, GIFs don't work very well as gradients, so I would go JPEG, and then I'm going to drop this quality down, something that doesn't look too low quality in the 50s there. And you can see the size of this image is really small, 34K. It's, they've really done amazing things with image optimization tools so that you can get a gradient large image like this down to a reasonable file size and it still looks really nice. So, and it has a lot of different gradients going on in there. So I would export this as my background, and then I would use it in Dreamweaver, or you could use it as a background in a division tag. So lots of different options there. So use whatever program that you're comfortable with. Again, I alternate back and forth. Photoshop is much better for working with photography, gradients, filters, and effects. If you're going to do a really simple layout for your website, you just want to do a simple layout, Fireworks is easier, and it works a little better for it. It also has easier to use web tools, slices and everything, because that's what the program's designed for. Whereas with Photoshop, it was just added on, tacked on to the tools. So either program, though, will be fine. So you're exporting pieces, like I've done right here, exported these pieces and got my background and everything, and then I'll take a look at the Dreamweaver site. And the way I do a lot of these tutorials is I want to show you the structure and the setup for how these sites are developed. I'm not going to do them from scratch because that will take hours and hours of videos, but I think if you see how they're built, you should be able to get an idea of how you can do something like this on your own. And then if you do get stuck, come and see me. Come by during office hours or give me a call. I'll be glad to work with you one-on-one if you do get stuck. But I hope this gives you some ideas. From this point on, it's pretty simple in actually building this website. There's a division tag up here at the top. So that holds this little space right up here at the top. There's a division tag on the left-hand side, okay, right here. And then each of these are just images dropped in one after another. Now, I did use insert rollover image for those. So I'll do another tutorial on the rollover images, but I use those on the left-hand side. Right-hand side, another division tag, just a left and right column setup. You can see this one is just float to the right, width of 600, and then height is automatic on this. The content fills it in automatically. And then one other trick that I like to do that I'll put a tutorial on also will be tables. So one thing you've probably noticed is getting your content to display correctly in the tables can be a little bit, in the division tags can be a little bit tricky. So tables work pretty well for that. We haven't talked about tables because they don't have a whole lot of use anymore, as far as the layout of your site goes. They're outdated, but they do work well for holding content. So you can see inside of this division tag, I actually have a table, and then it has some cells where I can drop this content in kind of one by one, and this is my embedded YouTube video. So again, I'll give you another tutorial on tables and using tables to kind of hold your content. That's a good way to do it. You're not using tables for design at all. You're just using it to hold your data. So lots of different principles in this tutorial, just kind of outlining how I built that site, so you can see using Fireworks, Photoshop, and then Dreamweaver together to produce a CSS layout, a site that you have developed from scratch. You haven't relied on these programs to generate everything for you, so you have more control over it. So that's it for this video.